The chamber of the Galactic Consortium's High Tribunal was a monument to arrogance. Its walls, forged from the molten cores of conquered worlds, pulsed with a faint, self-satisfied glow. The air smelled of ionized superiority and the faintest hint of ozone, likely from the energy fields that kept the rabble of lesser species at a respectful distance. High Chancellor Vexlath of Zorathis, a towering bureaucrat with 6 limbs and a carapace polished to a mirror sheen, adjusted his ceremonial sash, woven from the last threads of a civilization the consortium had peacefully assimilated 3 millennia prior. His primary eyes, each the size of a human skull, swept over the assembled delegates. The Kaith Morans clattered their crystalline claws in approval. The Vithuri coiled their tentacles in what passed for rapt attention. Even the Nixandra, with their 3 heads, managed to synchronize their nodding for once. "Today," Vexlath intoned, his voice resonating through the chamber's acoustically perfected halls, "we address the human problem." A holographic projection flickered to life above the tribunal's central dais, displaying Earth, a blue-green speck swirling in the void. The image zoomed in, revealing sprawling cities, tangled infrastructure, and the faint, flickering glow of a species that refused to die quietly. "Designation, Death World," Vexlath declared. "Category Rogue. Threat level, persistent." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The humans had been a nuisance for decades, too stubborn to collapse, too clever to ignore. They had clawed their way into the galactic community with all the grace of a wounded predator, and now the consortium had finally decided to put them down, economically at least. "By unanimous decree," Vexlath continued, unfurling a scroll etched in luminescent ink, "the following sanctions are imposed upon the Terran system." He began reading, each item dripping with bureaucratic relish. "Prohibition of hyperconductor alloys. Ban on cultural data exchanges. Revocation of all interstellar trade licenses. Suspension of..." The list went on and on. By the time he finished, Earth had been stripped of everything the consortium deemed necessary for a functioning society. The delegates rustled in satisfaction. This was how you handled upstarts. You didn't bomb them. You didn't invade. You simply made it impossible for them to exist in your universe. Vexlath's mandibles twitched in what passed for a smile. Projected collapse window, 6 standard months. On Earth, the news arrived via tight beam transmission, decoded in a dimly lit war room beneath the United Nations complex. The air smelled of stale coffee and desperation. UN Secretary General Elias Carter, a man who had spent the last decade negotiating humanity's place in a galaxy that didn't want them, stared at the holographic decree floating above the table. His advisors, men and women who had survived everything from first contact to the Mars famine, exchanged glances. "Well," said General Adisa Okoye, her voice dry as lunar dust, "they've finally done it. Cut us off at the knees. Doctor Soft at the knees. Dr. Soft." Lena Park, the youngest person in the room and the only one who hadn't yet learned the art of diplomatic pessimism, leaned forward. "They've banned hyperconductors? Do they think we can't make our own?" Carter rubbed his temples. "They think, well, beg for theirs." A chuckle rippled through the room. It was the kind of laugh that came from people who had spent their lives being underestimated. Okoye tapped the table. "We've got stockpiles. Not much, but enough to keep critical systems running for a year, maybe 2. 2 years, Park snorted. "Give me a junkyard and a week." All have a prototype that makes their hyperconductors look like copper wiring. Carter didn't doubt her. Humanity had a habit of turning desperation into innovation. But this wasn't just about tech. It was about perception. The consortium wanted Earth on its knees, pleading for scraps. He straightened. "Send the reply." The comms officer hesitated. "Sir?" "They didn't exactly leave a channel for negotiation." Carter's smile was thin. "Exactly. Sanctions received." "Exactly. Sanctions received." "See you in 6 months." Vexlath read the transmission in his private chambers, his carapace flushing with irritation. Such arrogance! Such insolence! Junior Analyst Crix, a low-ranking bureaucrat with an unfortunate fascination for human history, hovered near the door. High Chancellor, if I may. You may not, Vexlath snapped. Crix hesitated, then pressed on. The humans have a documented history of what? Scavenging? Primitive stubbornness? Vexlath waved a dismissive limb. They will break. They always do. Crix thought of the Terran Wars, the Mars famine. The century-long Ice Age humanity had weathered without so much as a whimper. Yes, High Chancellor, but as Crix retreated, he couldn't shake the feeling that the Consortium had just made a very big mistake. The Consortium's surveillance drones hovered like vultures over Earth's cities, their crystalline lenses drinking in the expected scenes of despair. High Chancellor Vexlath had promised the Galactic Assembly that within months, humanity would be on its knees, begging for scraps, clawing at the gates of the Consortium's mercy. Instead, the drones transmitted footage of humans laughing. In the ruins of a decommissioned fusion plant outside Jakarta, Dr. Carta. Lena Park wiped sweat from her brow. Her fingers blackened with soot as she welded together what the Consortium would have called garbage. Scrapped reactor shielding, discarded hoverbike engines, and the shattered remains of a smuggled Zorathian data core hummed under her makeshift rig. One more adjustment, she muttered, her voice raw from 3 sleepless nights. Her assistant, a wiry engineer named Raj, squinted at the flickering holoscreen displaying the molecular structure of the Consortium's prized hyperconductor alloy. Lena, this is insane. They banned the recipe, not the idea, Raj said, tapping the screen. You can't just improvise a quantum stable. The rig sparked. A pulse of blue light flared through the warehouse. Then, silence. Lena lifted a twisted strip of metal from the workbench. It shimmered, iridescent, under the dim light. Well, she said, grinning, tell the Consortium their embargo just got a lot more complicated. Junior Analyst Crick's secondary eyelids flickered as he reviewed the latest reports. The data was troubling. Not through Consortium-approved hydroponics, but through something called permaculture, a chaotic, soil-based method their drones had initially classified as primitive dirt worship. Now, entire regions were flourishing with crops the Consortium had explicitly banned. And then there were the energy reports. Crick's tendrils twitched as he pulled up footage from a Terran scrapyard. Humans were dismantling embargoed luxury goods, Zorathian holopods, Nixandrian climate regulators, and repurposing them into power grids. A Nixandrian regulator, designed to maintain the perfect humidity for delicate gardens, was now heating an entire human settlement through winter. High Chancellor, Crix began, hesitating as Vexlath turned his massive carapaced bulk toward him. The Terrans are adapting. Vexlath's primary limbs folded in the Zorathian equivalent of a sigh. Adapting or scavenging? Crix hesitated. Does it matter? They're not starving. They're not freezing. If anything, they're innovating? Vexlath's voice dripped with disdain. Don't be absurd. Innovation requires resources. Knowledge. These creatures are merely recycling their own filth. Crix thought of the Terran Wars, the Mars famine, the century-long Ice Age humanity had weathered without so much as a whimper. Yes, High Chancellor. But as he retreated, Crix pulled up an encrypted file, an old Terran historical text. The title glared back at him, The Siege of Leningrad, 872 Days Without Surrender. Secretary General Elias Carter leaned over the holotable, its surface flickering with damage reports from the embargo. His advisors looked exhausted, but their eyes burned with something the Consortium had never accounted for: annoyance. They banned coffee, growled Admiral Chen, slamming a fist on the table. Coffee, as if we wouldn't just grow our own damn beans, Carter smirked. And, Chen grinned, Brazil's old plantations are back online. Turns out, when you're not forced to export 90% of your crop to pay off interstellar debts, you can actually feed your people. You can actually feed your people. A murmur of dark laughter rippled through the room. Then Dr. Part's transmission came in. The grainy footage showed her holding the shimmering alloy strip. "We don't need their hyperconductors," she said, her voice crackling with static. "We've got volcanoes and scrap metal. And guess what? Ours works better." Carter exhaled slowly. "Send the schematics to every underground lab on the planet. If the consortium wants to play sanctions, well, play scarcity." A child in Nairobi assembling a solar lamp from banned hologame parts. Fishermen in Shanghai weaving nets from shredded consortium cargo pods. A factory in Detroit stamping out precision tools using melted down embargo drones. Crix watched, his tendrils coiled tight. In the corner of the screen, a black market alert pinged. A Terran smuggler, alias Rust, had just traded 5 human-made survival kits, waterproof, radiation-shielded, extremely coveted for a crate of medical nanites. The kits were stitched together from banned textiles. Crix hesitated. Then he archived the footage under irrelevant anomalies, but he kept a copy, just in case. The High Chancellor sipped his imported Nixandrian nectar, savoring its sweetness. The nectar was, technically, banned under the sanctions, but rules were for lesser species. His comms chimed. Another report from the drones. He skimmed it, then deleted it. Primitive stubbornness, he mused, nothing more. Outside his window, the stars burned cold and distant. On Earth, 1,000 fires burned brighter. The consortium's blockade drones circled Earth like vultures, their sleek silver hulls glinting in the sunlight as they scanned for unauthorized cargo. But below, in the shadows of ruined warehouses and repurposed subway tunnels, humanity was doing what it did best, making deals. Javier Rust. Mendez leaned against the rusted hull of a decommissioned shipping container, the flickering neon of a cracked knee-trespassing sign casting jagged shadows across his scarred face. His fingers drummed against the stock of his plasma cutter, a relic from the last corporate war, now repurposed for more creative applications. "You sure this is clean?" growled the figure across from him, their voice distorted by a cheap hollow mask. The alien's outline shimmered, flickering between a human businessman and something with too many limbs. Rust smirked, cleaner than a Zorathian's conscience. He kicked open the container door with a metallic groan, revealing stacks of crates marked with the consortium's embargoed insignia. Human-made survival kits. Self-heating rations, water purifiers, portable shelters, everything your starving colonies aren't getting thanks to Vexlath's little tantrum. The alien's disguise flickered again, betraying a glimpse of chitinous plating, a Kaith Moran. Then their kind had been hit hard by the sanctions. Their delicate ecosystems relied on human-manufactured stabilizers. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. Or, if you're feeling nostalgic, a case of that Nixandrian nectar the High Chancellor's so fond of. 3 sectors away, in the sterile opulence of the consortium's orbital chamber, junior analyst Crix stared at the latest surveillance reports. The data stream scrolled across their terminal, each line a fresh indictment of Vexlath's arrogance. Human black market activity, up 700%. Consortium world shortages, critical. Sanctioned goods reappearing on Zorathian elite markets. Crick's secondary claws tapped nervously. They had studied human history, the siege of Leningrad, the Irish potato famine, the Martian dust wars. Each time, the same pattern, deprivation bred innovation, and innovation bred defiance. Something troubling you, junior analyst? Crix flinched. High Chancellor Vexlath loomed behind them, his 4 primary limbs folded in smug repose. The scent of Nixandrian nectar clung to him like a bad omen. Uh, 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 why? If I clung to him like a bad omen. Tell me, do you admire their squalor? Crick's mind raced. I admire efficiency, High Chancellor, and the humans are adaptable. Perhaps we should reassess. Adaptable? Vexlath's laugh was a dry, clicking sound. They're scavengers, Cricks. Vermin clinging to the scraps we've denied them. Let them adapt to extinction. As Vexlath strode away, Crick's terminal pinged. A new report. Earth's underground networks now trading with 7 consortium-aligned species. Profit margins 300% above pre-sanction levels. Cricks hesitated, then encrypted the file. Someone would want to know. Back on Earth, Dr. Lena Park wiped sweat from her brow as she adjusted the makeshift forge in her bunker lab. The air smelled of molten metal and desperation. On the work table before her lay the fruits of 6 sleepless nights, a jagged, silvery alloy pulsing faintly with unstable energy. "Tell me that's not what I think it is," muttered Elias Carter, stepping inside. The UN Secretary General looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Lena grinned. "Hyperconductor X12, synthesized from scrap metal, volcanic ash, and spite." She tapped the alloy, and it hummed. "Vexlath's irreplaceable tech? We just made it better." Carter exhaled sharply. God help the galaxy if they ever embargo duct tape. Outside, the distant roar of a blockade drone echoed. Linus' smile faded. "They're tightening patrols. Rust says the Kaith Moran are getting nervous. Vexlath threatening orbital strikes on smugglers." Carter's jaw tightened. "Then we move faster. Leak the alloy specs to every back alley fabricator on the planet. Flood the market." Lena raised an eyebrow. "And when the consortium realizes we've reverse-engineered their crown jewel?" Carter's grin was all teeth. "Let them try to embargo ingenuity." In the bowels of a derelict freighter drifting just outside the blockade, Rust sealed his latest deal. The Kaith Moran operative handed over a crate of hyperconductor scraps, salvaged no doubt from some lost consortium shipment. "Pleasure doing business," Rust said, tipping an imaginary hat. The alien's hollow mask flickered again, revealing a glimpse of something like respect. "Your species is unexpected human." Rust chuckled. "Stick around, we're full of surprises." As the alien vanished into the void, Rust's comms crackled. "A new message, unsigned. Vexlath plans to escalate. Warn your people." Rust stared at the words, then crushed the device in his fist. The chamber of the Galactic Consortium's High Tribunal was a monument to arrogance, its walls lined with the iridescent scales of conquered species, its vaulted ceiling shimmering with holograms of past victories. High Chancellor Vexlath's forearms twitched as he paced, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking against the polished floor like a metronome of mounting fury. "Explain this," he hissed, flinging a data crystal onto the central dais. It projected a holographic feed, riotous crowds on the industrial world of Zorathis 7, their tentacles waving crude banners scrawled in human glyphs. GIEIR, Terra, Tech, back. Junior analyst Cricks, relegated to the shadows as usual, suppressed a shudder. The footage showed consortium citizens, his people, battering down the doors of a distribution hub, desperate for the very human-made components their leaders had banned. "The embargo is destabilizing our own supply chains," murmured Counselor Yix, her voice laced with the kind of diplomatic caution that meant, "I told you so." Zorathis C7's factories can't produce plasma conduits without human-forged alloys. The backups from Zenthar Prime are inferior. Vexlath's primary eyes narrowed. Inferior? Inferior? Inferior. He whirled on Cricks. "You, the human specialist." Tell me this is a fluke. Crick's throat tightened. He had spent nights buried in smuggled human texts, their histories of siege warfare, their wars of attrition. He knew what came next. High Chancellor, he began carefully, humanity has a resilience threshold. Deprivation doesn't break them. It focuses them. A derisive snort from the V3 delegate. Focus? They're scavengers. Our drones show them melting down their own satellites for parts. Exactly, Crick said too quickly. He regretted it instantly as Vexlath's gaze sharpened. On Earth, UN Secretary General Elias Carter stood in a hangar that smelled of welding sparks and desperation. Before him, Dr. Lena Park wiped grease from her hands and grinned at the monstrosity behind her. A jagged, asymmetrical FTL drive cobbled from scavenged consortium tech, smuggled hyperconductors, and what looked like part of an old space station's coffee dispenser. You're telling me, Carter said slowly, that this thing can break the blockade? Park patted the hull. Oh, it'll break more than that. The consortium's precious unreplicable tech, reverse engineered, their embargoed fuel catalysts, synthesized from lunar regolith and expired painkillers, she smirked. Turns out, banning trade just made us creative. A comms officer burst in, panting. Sir, the black market feeds. Zarathus 7's in open revolt. They're demanding our medical nanites. Carter exchanged a glance with Park. The tension in the hangar shifted, thickening like storm clouds before lightning. Back in the tribunal, Vexlath's political rivals struck like carrion birds sensing weakness. The humans aren't starving, hissed the Nixandra representative, both heads speaking in unison. They're exporting. My agents intercepted a shipment of their survival gear, bartered for Vithuri hydroponic schematics. Crick's datapad buzzed. An encrypted message from the dissident faction. Leak ready. Their move. His pulse spiked. Vexlath slammed a fist on the dais. Then we escalate. Tighten the blockades. Deploy the orbital interdiction fleet. With what ships? Yick snapped. Half our cruisers are grounded waiting for human coolant systems. The chamber erupted. Crix edged backward, his fingers hovering over the transmit key. In the neon-choked underworld of Mars Tharsis dockyards, Javier Rust, Mendez adjusted the stolen holomask of a Zarathian merchant and watched the chaos unfold. The consortium's own trade hubs were now his best customers, their officials desperate, their security lax. A V-Theory dockmaster, tentacles quivering with anxiety, handed over a crate of antimatter regulators in exchange for human-made radiation scrubbers. Pleasure doing business, Rust drawled, tossing the alien a bonus pack of Cuban cigars. Highly illegal, highly coveted. The V-Thuris eyes widened. Tell your bosses, Earth sends its regards. Crix finally acted. As Vexlath ranted about crushing the infestation, he slipped the dissident's data packet into the public archive. Every failed sanction, every backfiring embargo, every humiliating proof that humanity wasn't just surviving. They were winning. The leak hit the galactic networks like a supernova. Carter's war room screens lit up with incoming feeds, consortium worlds in upheaval, their leaders scrambling to explain why human primitive trash was now propping up their economies. Park whooped as the prototype FTL drive hummed to life, its jury-rigged core glowing defiantly. Time to send a message, Carter murmured. On the view screen, Vexlath's face appeared, a live broadcast from the crumbling tribunal. His mandibles twitched in barely contained rage. This defiance will be. Carter cut the transmission. Prep the FTL test, he ordered. Let's show them what defiance really looks like. The chamber aboard the UNSS Defiant hummed with the low, pulsing energy of jury-rigged systems, its walls lined with exposed wiring and hastily welded plating, testaments to human ingenuity under siege. At its center, the prototype FTL drive glowed like a captured star, its core a patchwork of scavenged alien alloys and repurposed Earth tech. Secretary General Elias Carter stood before it, his reflection warped in its shimmering surface, a ghost of defiance staring back at him. On the view screen, the Galactic Consortium's High Chancellor Vexlath flickered into view, his four primary limbs twitching in barely contained fury. The transmission was live, broadcast across every consortium-aligned world, a deliberate choice. Carter had hacked the feed himself. This defiance will be met with, Vexlath's voice crackled, mandibles clicking in that infuriatingly precise Zorathian cadence. Carter didn't let him finish. He severed the connection with a flick of his wrist, plunging the chamber into silence. Then, with a grin sharp enough to cut diamond, he turned to Dr. Lena Park, who was elbow deep in the FTL drive's coolant system. "Prep the test," he said. "Let's show them what defiance really looks like." The countdown began. Across the galaxy, the consortium's ruling elite watched in stunned silence as their own networks were hijacked. On Zorathis, the High Tribunal's crystalline spires flickered with the unauthorized feed. On Vithuri Prime, tentacled aristocrats abandoned their floating banquet tables to gape at the spectacle. Even the lowly maintenance drones on Crick's surveillance outposts paused in their duties, their optics fixed on the stolen broadcast. The Defiant vanished, not in the elegant, ripple-free manner of consortium drives, but in a violent, human burst of light, as if the ship had torn a hole in reality through sheer spite. The shock wave rattled nearby satellites. The consortium's long-range sensors screamed in protest. 3 seconds later, the Defiant reappeared right above the High Tribunal. Vexlath's chitinous face paled to a sickly gray. His lower limbs trembled, a telltale sign of Zorathian distress. Impossible! Human FTL technology was supposed to be decades, centuries behind the consortiums, yet here they were, mocking the very laws of physics with a drive built from scrap. Carter's face filled the screens again, this time from the Defiance bridge. Behind him, the crew, engineers in grease-stained jumpsuits, ex-smugglers turned navigators, even a few former diplomats now sporting black-market cybernetics, grinned like wolves. "High Chancellor," Carter began, his voice dripping with faux courtesy. "We've reviewed your sanctions, found a few loopholes." A data packet exploded across the consortium's networks. Schematics for the FTL drive, blueprints for Park's hyperconductor synthesis, even manifests from Rust's smuggling operations. Everything. "You cut off our trade routes," Carter continued, "so we made our own." "You banned your tech? We reverse engineered it. You tried to starve us?" He leaned forward. "Turns out humans thrive on scarcity. It's in our blood." In the shadows of the tribunal, junior analyst Crix watched the feed with something dangerously close to awe. His superiors had dismissed humanity as primitive, emotional, unpredictable. But Crix had studied their history. He knew what happened when humans were cornered. He tapped a hidden console, releasing the files had been hoarding for months. Intercepted reports of consortium worlds collapsing without human-manufactured parts, black market logs proving their economies now depended on Earth's ingenuity. The data spread like wildfire. Protests erupted on a dozen industrial planets. The Vithuri delegation, their tentacles coiled in outrage, publicly denounced the sanctions. Even the Kaith Moran, with their crystalline indifference, began questioning Vexlath's leadership. Back on the Defiant, Carter watched the chaos unfold with cold satisfaction. The consortium was fracturing, its arrogance turned against itself. Then Vexlath's face reappeared, his transmission shaky, desperate. "You think this changes anything?" "The consortium's fleets will what?" Carter interrupted. "Blockade us harder? You already did that. Bomb us? We invented guerrilla warfare." Or, he smirked, you could admit you lost. Then, from somewhere off-screen, a voice, Crix, crackled through the comms. The dissident faction moves to overturn the sanctions. The vote is already underway. Vexlath's mandibles spasmed. Traitor, realist, Crix corrected. You sanctioned their economy. They sanctioned your pride. And that, High Chancellor, is a wound your kind will never recover from. The transmission cut. The galaxy held its breath. And in the heart of the defiant, the FTL drive hummed. A promise, a threat, a victory as humanity's stubbornness echoed through the stars. Transition to Section 6, the sanctions collapse, the galaxy reels. And somewhere, in the ruins of his own arrogance, Vexlath learns what it means to underestimate a species that refuses to kneel. The sanctions collapse like a dying star. One moment, the Galactic Consortium's blockade fleets orbited Earth in perfect, gleaming formation, their hulls polished to a mirror sheen that reflected their unshakable superiority. The next, they were scrambling, retreating, rerouting, retreating, as the consortium's own member worlds erupted in chaos. High Chancellor Vexlath stood in the heart of the Zorathian High Chamber, his four primary limbs twitching in barely contained fury. The chamber, once a monument to bureaucratic invincibility, now felt like a tomb. The walls, carved from the bones of extinct civilizations, seemed to mock him. The air, thick with the scent of sacred oils burned to honor past victories, choked him. The holographic feeds showed Earth's markets booming. Human trade vessels, crude, patched-together things that should have been embarrassments, were now docking at consortium ports, their holds overflowing with reverse-engineered hyperconductors, biosynthetic foodstuffs, and, stars help them, entertainment hollows. The very goods the consortium had denied them had become luxuries they now craved. Vexlath's mandibles clicked in agitation. "This is impossible," he hissed. Across the chamber, junior analyst Crix, former junior analyst now, stood with his secondary limbs clasped behind his back. His carapace, usually a muted bureaucratic gray, was now adorned with the garish, defiant colors of Earth Envoy delegation. A human-made pin glittered on his thorax, a crude depiction of a phoenix rising from flames. "With respect, High Chancellor," Crix said, his voice dripping with the kind of calm that only came from winning, "you forgot to embargo human stubbornness." UN Secretary General Elias Carter raised a glass of something that had, until recently, been strictly prohibited by the consortium. The liquid inside was a violent shade of purple, swirling with luminescent particles that popped like miniature supernovae against the glass. "To scarcity," he toasted, grinning. Across the table, Dr. Lena Park clinked her own glass against his. "To innovation," Javier Rust Mendez, leaning against the wall with his usual air of someone who just stolen the galaxy's wallet, smirked. "To smuggling." The room erupted in laughter. Outside, Earth cities blazed with light, not the desperate flicker of a species on its knees, but the brilliant, unapologetic glow of a civilization that had just outstubborned an empire. The chamber, once a place of slow, deliberate power plays, was now a den of panic. Zorathian industrial output has dropped 40% since the human trade routes were cut, screeched Delegate Vithuri, her tentacles lashing. "Our factories require their components. The Nixandran undercities are in revolt," roared another. "They miss their human dramas." Vexlath stood at the center of it all, his once imposing frame now hunched under the weight of failure. He had gambled everything on humanity's collapse. Instead, they had thrived, and then the final blow landed. Crix, Ambassador Crix now, stepped forward, flanked by two human diplomats. He placed a data crystal on the floor. It projected Earth's terms. No reparations, no apologies, just recognition. The consortium, for the first time in its millennia-spanning history, bowed. Years later, Crix stood on a balcony overlooking New Geneva, the heart of humanity's interstellar alliance. Below, the streets teemed with beings from 100 worlds, Zorathian bureaucrats haggling with human engineers, Vithuri scholars debating with Terran philosophers, even a few Nixandran merchants selling bootleg human holonovels. Lena Park joined him, her hair streaked with silver now, her smile still sharp. Regret defecting? Trix chuckled. His carapace now permanently dyed in the vibrant hues of Earth's sunset. Not even slightly. Somewhere, in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, Vexlath scraped by on a pension too meager to afford even the cheapest human imports. And the stars burned brighter for it.